What do you think of the new regulations?
I'm a proponent of the new regulations. Anything that saves the 2015s is good by me.
Cool. I'm indifferent because I don't keep any.
I don't keep any either, but it's other people are keeping them.
All right, here we go, guys. And yeah, you just heard Jesse there. For those of you that don't know, Jesse was one of my subscriber contest winners. We had that trip last weekend. And it turns out Jesse's a big surf caster and is really in tune with all the conservation efforts, all the regulations, especially around striped bass. Something I'm not, as I pointed out to Jesse in that clip, you know, I'm not as up to date on them, but unless you've been living under a rock, you know, the big news in the saltwater fishing community the past couple of weeks is that there is a proposal that it's actually passed. States have until July 2nd to implement this proposal, and that's specifically around changing the slot limit for striped bass, currently 28 inches to 35 inches, changing it to 28 to 31 inches. And Jesse mentions that 2015 class, and we're going to talk about that today. And, you know, again, if you are active on social media, if you're on Facebook, Instagram, etc., you will probably have seen a lot of noise around this. And a lot of it is coming from charter captains and party boats, and this is going to destroy their fishery. And look, I get it. My 5th year running a charter. It's going to be my last year for a while, and I'm doing it part-time. But if you've watched any of my videos on my profit and loss from running my charter business, I totally get where these guys are coming from, because it's a very fragile business to be in. The costs are insane. The fuel costs the last couple of years have been insane. The dock fees on the East End of Long Island, and I'm sure this carries over to Massachusetts, New Jersey, Delaware, other areas where striped bass are targeted. I'm sure it's the same for them. And I get why any change in the regulation is an automatic red flag for them. Anything, especially a change that could negatively impact them. And at the end of the video, I'll share my thoughts on, is this a real issue or a perceived issue? And I'm going to want comments on this video. And for those of you that do go on party boats and charters, specifically targeting striped bass, we'll talk about it more at the end of the video. But let me know what your thoughts are on that. Is that going to impact you paying money to go on a boat, knowing that the slot, instead of being to 35 inches, is now at 31 inches? And I mentioned this, I'm not taking a personal opinion on this. I do target them occasionally. The majority of my charters are fluke and blackfish, but I do love striped bass fishing. The first boat I bought 20 plus years ago was specifically so I could target striped bass. But I'm not going to offer opinion on this. I'm going to lay out the facts, because I do think there's been a lot of hysteria, vitriol, just a lot of perhaps unnecessary noise around this regulation without people knowing the full facts. And let's start with, and I have my computer here, I'm looking at some notes I took. Let's start with who proposed this. And it's a group called the ASFMC. And we're going to segue from GoPro to computer, and we are going to just look at who exactly the ASFMC is. And here we are on their webpage, and you can look this up yourself, asfmc.org. But basically, it's a regulatory body around fisheries management, and many of the regulations that we deal with do emanate from this group. And their concern specifically is around this 2015 class of striped bass. And there are a lot of resources out there that go into detail, because if you read the ASFMC's statement on it, it's a bit of a dense read. And the state of Massachusetts has actually come out with what I think is a great FAQ section, literally talking about this issue. And they specifically go into that 2015 class. And it's right here. Why was an emergency action taken? The main reason, we'll start right here, the main reason for the increase in harvest was that some striped bass from the abundant 2015 year class, those fish born in 2015, had grown enough to be harvested under the 2022 slot limit, 28 to 35. Like people, fish grow at different rates. And this year, the 2015 year class will be entirely recruited into this size range, meaning all those fish from 2015, which was the most abundant spawn in many years, and the years after that have not been as fertile. These fish all fall between 28 and 35 inches right now. And last year, amazingly enough, the recreational anglers, we went, and recreational anglers, for the record, includes people like myself who run charter boats, party boats, and folks on their own boats fishing from shore. It's not just commercial fishermen. We'll talk about the commercial fishermen in a minute. But they really had a banner year. And those numbers did not come in till late 2022. And it far exceeded what the expected catch was going to be for 2022. And now the ASFMC is looking at this and saying, hold on, all these 2015 fish now fall into that size range where they can be kept. Many, many more than we expected were kept last year. What do we do now to ensure that, we don't burn through these fish this year and then have nothing really left for future years? And that's why they came up with this proposal to limit it to 31 inches, giving those fish that are over 31 inches and probably, unless they're really big, likely from that 2015 class, the opportunity to grow and to continue spawning, and hopefully future years will have a better class. And we're specifically talking about Chesapeake fish here now, this 2015 class. There is a Hudson Valley fishery or Hudson River fishery also, but the majority of the fish we see in New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and New York, I mean like the ocean side, those are not coming from the Hudson River fishery. They're coming from the Chesapeake. And in fact, we'll slide right over to On the Water. And if you follow On the Water, a great magazine, you know that every spring they start publishing their striper migration. And you can see down here, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, this is where the fish start to migrate up north, and eventually they make their way up to Maine. So yeah, they do spawn in other places, but the majority of the fish that most of us catch in New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maine, Massachusetts, that's part of the Chesapeake Bay class of fish. And in the beginning of the video, I mentioned we'll talk about the commercial fishery in a minute, and that minute is here. So we're looking at this page from the official report, and I was actually quite shocked by this, but the commercial harvest only makes up 11% of the total fish harvested, the total striped bass harvested. Only 11%. So that means 89% of the fish harvested are from recreational anglers. And again, that includes guys fishing on their own boats, guys fishing from shore, guys fishing on party boats, charter boats, basically anyone who's not selling the fish at a market. That's just 11%. And with striped bass, they're issue tags, and those tags were already issued for 2023. The expectation is that 2024, there will be a consequence, whether it's reduction in tags or whether it's a change in the slot limit for the commercial fishermen as well. But they too will feel the pain starting next year. But because it's really such a de minimis amount of the total that are caught every year, striped bass caught every year, no action taken this year on the commercial fishermen. But again, that's the reason why, because that's the other thing you're seeing on social media. Well, how come they didn't change the commercial regulations? And really that's the reason why. And it's actually a sensible reason. And again, I'm not taking a position on this. It's not going to impact me in any way. I just want folks to understand the facts behind all this stuff and not just, see people ranting on Facebook and think, well, if so-and-so is ranting, it must be true. And, commercial fishermen too, unlike other fish like fluke, where guys are dragging them, 40, 50 miles offshore in the winter and getting the really big girls that lay eggs. President Bush, GW, back in 2000, and when was this? 2007, October of 2007, he actually signed an executive order. Here's watching hopefully we're doing this correctly and you guys can all see my computer screen. But he signed the bill that implemented the 3 mile line on catching them, rod and reel. It did a lot to protect the fishery. And we have seen, at least personally, I have seen from the time I first started fishing bass, look, to me, I agree where people go crazy, but we're catching so many fish. I get it. And a lot of this is due to regulations like this. But the science is showing that the 2015 class is the last big class. Those are the fish we're catching now. And if we run through them, we might be looking at what guys who fished for bass in the 80s looked at, which was, a lot of nothing. And no one is saying you can't fish these fish, for the record. You can still fish them. You just have to release the ones that are over 31 inches. Let's talk about state compliance. Now, interestingly enough, one state is indicating that they may not comply with these regulations, and that is New Jersey. And we see here New Jersey is kicking the can down the road, and they may not put in these emergency measures by July 2nd, like the ASFMC is ordering states to do. And what happens if they don't? Well, they're going to be okay, it looks like, till October. No changes in the regulations. But depending on the numbers after that and the reassessment by the ASFMC after the season's over, there may be a moratorium for New Jersey, guys, where you won't even legally be allowed to target them. We know you can say you're fishing for bluefish or whatever, but the whole fishery might be shut down. And now, instead of looking at a 28 to 31, you may be looking at nothing. So just going back to what I said in the beginning, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Again, me personally, it's not going to affect me. I'm still going to enjoy catching them. I'm still going to enjoy releasing them. I personally don't keep striped bass, but I understand that's my, that's just me. If you want to keep a fish for the table, I completely understand. But is it going to stop you, those of you that either fish for them on your boat, fish for them from the shore, or more importantly, fish from them from party boats and charter boats? Is that actually going to stop you from going on those charter boats, those party boats, or putting fuel in your boat and going out and trying to catch them, knowing that there's less of a likelihood of you keeping a fish? You're still allowed to keep the 28s to 31s, but obviously there are days where the one fish you may catch that's a keeper is 34 inches or 35 inches. Is that going to stop you? My blackfish friends have this saying, the tug is the drug. And that, for me, at least for me personally, I just care. My fun in fishing is catching the fish, the thrill of hunting them down, finding them, fighting them on light tackle in many instances. Is that going to change for you? Will you stop fishing because of this slot limit? Let me know in the comments. Hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you like these videos, hit that like button. And if you're not already a subscriber and you like content like this, please consider subscribing.